Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 7th of February of 2024. Today we have a significant number of very interesting updates and details, so let's start. And first, as usually these days, we're going to start with Avdiivka. As you can see, I have updated the map, and now you can see this small square. This is the territory according to the sources confirmed and unconfirmed. The Russians managed to establish control over since the beginning of this phase of the special military operation, of this phase of Avdiivka assault. So as you can see, the Russians managed to capture significant territories. The Russians are moving from the residential area to the south and the central part. The Russians are moving through the fields in the direction of the fortifications that located to the south of Kamyanka. But let's start step by step, because the most important updates are, as usually, are coming from the central part, from the most important area. Let's start from the northern direction. According to information we have, according to the most the reliable resources, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish control over the bridge above the railways. This is the bridge. This is a strategical point, because this area, this bridge, opens the way and opens the gates for the Russians for further offensive operation in direction of industrial Ave. Furthermore, according to the understanding of the situation, as we discussed in the previous videos, the battle for the city, for the battle for Avdiivka, is already lost for the Ukrainian army. And according to unconfirmed sources, the Ukrainians started the, let's say, retreat process and withdrawal process. They started withdrawing positions with the most experienced, most powerful forces, trying to replace them with territory defense forces, with bus drivers, and many other poor quality groups of forces. When talking about the Russians, currently they have answered the residential area that located between the railways. This is a very important sector, and as I understand, according to my understanding of the situation, neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians expected that the Russians are able to develop their offensive operation so successful. So nobody expected that there is going to be even a need to protect this, let's say, this main supply road between chemical plant and the southern part of Avdiivka. So that's why we see that everything is collapsing so fast, everything develops so fast. And according to the most of the military experts, currently the Russians have just one goal, one target. Of course, every single direction is important: to continue offensive operation to the central part, to cut the Ukrainian positions to the south of Kamyanka and this fortification belt, to continue offensive operation from Saborny, Sportivny, Chernyshevskoye Street to the central part, to establish control over the former air defense base. Everything is important, but the most important operation, and the operation that the Russians are currently trying to implement, is to establish control over the motor depot. This is the motor depot, it's bus station, motor depot, and the Russians currently are focusing everything they have to take control over this territory. Let's add this territory on map, because if the Russians are able to establish control over this block, then the Russians will be able to cut the main supply road physically, and this is going to be the end of the battle for Avdiivka. And this is not going to be a cauldron, because the Ukrainians will be able to start to move some forces. Probably they're going to lose up to 60 or even 70% of the forces, but not 100% of forces that currently located in Avdiivka, if the Russians are able to cut industrial Ave. This is not the cauldron, this is going to be something like tactical encirclement, but if the Russians are able to move even further or to get some progress from the south, then this is going to be a cauldron, and obviously the Russians will try to encircle as many as possible. According to information from the open source, according to the Ukrainian source and the Russians as well, there are around 10,000 soldiers inside of Avdiivka. I'm not sure whether this number includes the Ukrainian forces in the chemical plants or not, but anyway, it's 2 brigades. And of course, if the Russians are able to encircle 2 brigades, and if the Russians, the most important, is able to force every single soldier of these 10 brigades to surrender, to save its life, this is going to be not just military, this is going to be political disaster for the Ukraine and Zelensky himself and Zaluzhny and so on. So this is the reason. Now I hope you understand why Zaluzhny tried to leave his position of commander-in-chief, because he understands understand that this is going to be disaster. He doesn't understand that the Ukrainians will lose Avdiivka. Everybody understands the Ukrainians will lose Avdiivka, but probably Zaluzhny is the one of the tens who understand that this is going to be military and political disaster for the Ukrainians, because nobody knows what exactly is happening to the west of Avdiivka. Nobody knows about the level of fortifications here. Nobody knows where exactly the Russians are able to move further. Nobody knows whether the Ukrainians are able to stop the Russians, let's say, in Очеретино or Selidova or Pokrovsk. Maybe the Ukrainians are not able to do anything. And he just wants to leave the situation and to retreat and to be the first in the process of withdrawing positions and retreating. Furthermore, we got more details, more updates that Ukrainians start mining the buildings inside of the 9th quarter, the area, the quarter of Avdiivka with the high-rise area with high-rise building, and they start mining process as we used to see in Bakhmut. If you remember the final stages of the battle assault of Bakhmut, the Ukrainians start mining the buildings in the citadel, and they start blowing up them, but they had some problems with supply and support, so that's why they didn't have enough of explosive to destroy every single building. But probably now the Ukrainians will try not to repeat the same mistakes, and now they will try to destroy every single building. So we'll see what is going to be next on this direction. But few more words about the entire situation, few more words. We are very focused on the situation in Avdiivka, in Novomykhailivka, and we are losing the most important point. And today we'll try to point your attention to the most important information. If you remember, a few weeks ago, probably 2 weeks ago, I told you that the Russians had just 4 weeks left until the bad quality of the weather comes, until the bad quality of the ground comes, and so on. And that's why I'm telling you that now Russia and Ukraine is getting to the final stage of the winter military campaign. The next 2-3 weeks are going to be the final weeks of the military winter campaign. It doesn't mean that the Russians are going to stop and they're not going to start another offensive operation somewhere else. Obviously, and according to information we're receiving, I understand that the Russians are not going to have even a short operational pause, maybe a week or 2 or 3, and somewhere in April the Russians are going to start the next spring military offensive campaign, and we will discuss this spring military campaign a little bit few more minutes later after we finish with the most important directions. Okay, when talking about the southern area, we have another geolocated confirmation of Ukraine counterattack, but now when talking about any other direction than the central part or northern part of Avdiivka, I have some doubts whether this video fresh or old, because as I understand, currently there are no clashes anywhere on the southern part or in the eastern part, because either the Russians and the Ukrainians are completely focused in the battle for the central part, because this is the most important. Who wins the battle for the central part wins the battle for Avdiivka. Or to be more precise, if the Russians wins the central part, the battle for the central part, they win the entire battle for Avdiivka. If the Ukrainians are able to stabilize the situation and to repel Russian attacks, they will just win probably a few weeks, which is very important before spring comes with a very poor quality of the ground. And now the battle probably from the Ukrainian side is the battle for this. Furthermore, we got some updates from the southern part, from the forgotten industrial area. The Russians managed to discover another ammo depot of the Ukrainian forces somewhere on the ground, and as a result of artillery strike, that ammo depot was destroyed. So no changes on these directions, southern and eastern, and significant number of dates on the northern. We also got the video from the Ukrainian soldier who was hiding somewhere in the basements of the chemical plant, who was saying about very, very poor conditions of the Ukrainians in this area, and obviously he has already lost his faith and lost any, let's say, belief in Ukrainian victory. So, and now we are moving further. We are going to talk few more geolocations to show the Russians are using not just the situational operations on the ground. On this video, for example, we see the Ka-52 helicopters that were flying above Donetsk in direction of Avdiivka. And from the distance, the Russian Ka-52 alligators helicopters were attacking the Ukrainian positions inside of the citadel, inside of the chemical plant, and in the area in the vicinity of the city. Now let's move to another important area. Let's talk a little bit about Marinka direction. Today we got geolocation from the Ukrainian side. On this video, for example, we can see how the forces of 46 Air Mobile Brigade were bombing and attacking with FPV drones the Russian positions in the northeastern part of Georgievka. This is the geolocation. This is geolocated video, confirms the further Russian progress, and as you can see, the progress is significant. After the Russians managed to wedge inside the Ukrainian positions along this line, they managed to secure the flank, and that allowed the Russians to continue offensive operation further along this strait. And now, as you can see, the Russians have almost got the intersection of the Zhovneva Strait with this tree line. If the Russians are able to establish control over this territory, we can start counting days before Georgievka and Georgievka falls, and of course with the strongholds that located to the north of this area. So the situation, once again, according to these geolocations, develops not in Ukrainian favor. Now we are moving to Pobeda Konstantinovka area. This is very important direction. The Ukrainian sources published the videos of FPV drone strikes against the Russian forces in this stronghold, which confirms the Russian activation with intensifying of Russian activity. The Russians within the next few hours or days will start offensive operation in Pobeda once again. Before that attack, the Russians will complete or continue the bombing and shelling of Ukrainian strongholds to the west of Pobeda. On this video, we see how the Russians managed to discover another Ukrainian armored vehicle that was hidden somewhere in this stronghold, and as a result of Krasnopol strike, that armored vehicle was destroyed. The same story took place a little bit to the southwest of Pobeda. Another Ukrainian position was discovered, and as a result of Krasnopol, that position was destroyed. Pobeda currently is a very important city, and the Russians need to hurry up and to speed up their offensive operation because they don't have much time. Why I'm saying that the Russians don't have much time, everything is very simple. As a result of offensive operation, as a result of very heavy clashes, a very smart offensive operation, the Russians managed to enter the eastern part of Novomykhailivka, and the Ukrainians were forced to step back to the central part. We have already discussed this situation in the morning. We have lots of updates from different mappers. We have even the video of Russian flag somewhere in the vicinity of the eastern part of Novomykhailivka. This is the Russian flag. We have some updates from the map according to different mappers, but the most important is that the Russians published the video, the geolocated video of entire offensive operation of the Russian Marines, of Marine Corps. On this video, for example, we can see the beginning of that operation and the progress of the Russian forces inside of the village. This operation, as you can see, took place in the early morning when the sun was just rising. The quality of video is very poor because of smoke that was flying at the skies above the Russian soldiers. We can see the Russian infantry who was moving through the fields under the cover of armored personnel carriers attacking the Ukrainian positions under support and protection of Russian tanks. We see the Russian reconnaissance drone flying above the Russians, trying to secure the area and to tell the Russians and to coordinate the Russians how to move. As you can see, almost without any barriers, the Russians managed to bypass the first defense belt, then the second defense belt, then they managed to enter the trenches, and after that the Russians started movements along the village itself, or at least along the ruins that led from the village. Most of the scenes of this video were geolocated, and if we return back to the map, one of the videos, one of the attacks were geolocated in this area, so the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to bypass the few first buildings of Novomykhailivka and to reach this line. Another video was geolocated as well, and according to information, the Russians were attacking from this direction and entered this territory. According to most of the resources, this attack took place probably 2 or even 3 days ago already, let's say on the 5th or on the 6th of February, and as a result of attack on the 4th, 5th or 6th of February, the Russians managed to establish control over this territory. Now is 7th of February, and very likely and obviously the Russians during the previous 48 hours managed to improve their positions and to move further to the west in this area. Probably and very likely the next days we're going to receive more updates and more geolocations of clashes clashes inside of Novomykhailivka. And this is the reason why the Russians need to hurry up in direction of Pobeda, because at the moment when the Russians reach the western outskirts of this village, the Russians need by the time already bypass Pobeda and to get, let's say, somewhere here. So they need to be as close as possible to the strongholds in Konstantinovka and Paraskovievka from the north. They need to be somewhere here, and at the same time they're going to be somewhere here. And from these two directions, the Russians will make another attempt to attack, or make a very powerful rush, powerful attack in direction of Paraskovievka and Konstantinovka. So this is the reason. So that's why the Russians have activated in direction of Pobeda, because they see that everything develops very fast, that there is almost no resistance from the Ukrainian side. The forces of 72nd, 79th and of territory defense brigades were, let's say, damaged heavily during the previous phases of attacks. So for now everything goes very smoothly for the Russians, and everything develops obviously in Russian favor. When talking about Vadiana Ugledar, there are no updates from this direction. So once again, the progress Georgievka, progress Novomykhailivka, Avdiivka is about to be encircled and collapsed. The Russian progress and attacks in Nivoyska, significant updates to be precise. When talking about Bakhmut Artyomov's direction, everything is the same story. The Russians are using Lancet strike massively, significant number of let's say FPV drone strikes, significant number of Lancet strikes. Everything is under Russian control, everything is under Russian fire, everything is under Russian, the situation is stable. The Ukrainians don't have possibilities to do anything. The Russians have superiority in drones, in artilleries, in let's say forces. The Russians are located maybe at some positions in the lowland and some positions in the hills, but we see almost no resistance and almost no counterattacks from the Ukrainian side, which confirms that, and from the other side we don't see any operations on the ground. Because when talking about Bogdanovka, another day with another serious batch of video of FPV drone strikes against the Ukrainian positions, and once again no progress or neither nor movement on the ground. And as I understand, we are not going to see any movements for a very long time, at least until the end of the battle for Avdiivka and Novomykhailivka, and furthermore the battle of Terny, because these three battles currently are the most important things for the Russians that they want to complete before the president elections. Putin, before the president elections, wants to establish flag over Avdiivka, over Novomykhailivka, and to force the Ukrainians to step back from the Russian bank of Zhiribets River. This is like a vital question for him, for his president campaign. Obviously he's going to win without even these achievements, but of course he wants to improve his positions with this progress. So that's why all the resources Russia currently has, they try to send exactly on these three main directions. Very interesting updates are coming from Bilohorivka, and the Russian sources published more videos, more details to be more precise about the battle for this territory. According to information we have, the Russians as a result of offensive operation managed to establish control over this territory. And today Ukrainian sources published very interesting article. To be more precise, the soldier from this territory published his own post or wrote a message to another Ukrainian pro-Ukrainian Telegram channel trying to describe the situation in Bilohorivka, and that was pretty awful description. I will give a few short notes from that description. He was saying that this territory was under Ukrainian control, and that this was one of the most stabilized line of the combat contact. There were no problems. Of course, sometimes the Russians were attacking, but most of the attacks were repelled by the Ukrainians and so on. It was like day-to-day activity. The Russians attacks, the Ukrainians repel. But at one day, the Ukrainian soldier reported that they woke up and started their activity, and they realized that the Russians are from 5 to 10 meters in front of them. They even didn't expect this Russian attack, and they were very surprised how the Russians managed to short the distance with them for so short period of time and being invisible. Later, the author of this article make a conclusion that maybe the Russians made another pipeline operation or something like this, because it was really unexpected. And of course, because of the fact that the distance between the Ukrainians and the Russians was too short, the Russians managed to reduce the entire, let's say, Ukrainian platoon in this area to capture the territory, and only one Ukrainian survived, and that Ukrainian who survived started asking for help, and he started just calling like artillery fire on himself. He started calling to his artillery, let's say squads of Ukrainian army, asking that I'm encircled, my team is, I lost the team, you can attack me, you can attack my position because there are a lot of Russians. And the end of the story is, I don't know, is the most surprise, I don't know, it's like... and he received the answer that we can't supply you, we can't support you, we can't attack this territory with artillery because we don't have artillery rounds. That was the answer, and the territory was completely and successfully captured by the Russians. But as I understand, that Ukrainian also managed to survive, and basically he left the territory. So this is the situation. For now, we haven't received any geolocate confirmation of any progress, so let's wait. Obviously, we're going to receive the same story from Tirny. No changes on the ground, no changes in the area, but you know that when talking about the Ministry of Defense report, according to information we have, just during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost 1,555 soldiers for one day, and this is the heaviest loss of the Ukrainian army since the beginning of this year. The last time the Ukrainians lost more or less the same numbers took place on the 22nd of January during the operation of Avdiivka pipeline operation, so during those days. And even now the Ukrainians lost even 50 soldiers more in comparison with that day. So obviously the previous 24 hours were the toughest 24 hours for the entire Ukrainian army. When talking about Kupiansk-Liman direction, we don't have any updates from this territory, just one geolocation of FPV drone strikes against the Russian positions, that's it. And now we are moving probably to the most important area in the special military operation. You know that I started describing and started pointing your attention to Novomykhailivka probably somewhere in June of 2024. Almost like 7 months ago, we started discussing the battle for Novomykhailivka, that this battle is about to start because we were talking about significant number of FAPs, artillery, Mur. This village was under very heavy fire for the previous 7 months, and now we see that the logic ending of all those bombings and strikes is the beginning of the ground operation. So you know that the Russians, they are not attacking any territory for nothing. This is the stage of the special military operation when the Russians, before any attack, try to reduce the territory to ruins. Now we see the same story in Bogdanovka. The Russians are not moving, they're attacking the Ukrainians with FPV drones, and only after this procedure they will start offensive. The Russians didn't attack Avdiivka before because they wasn't like 100% sure that it's safe and they can do this, and they were bombing the village, that heavily reducing till ruins. And now we see the same story from Vovchansk. Currently, when talking about any direction, there are 2 directions of Ukrainian positions, of Ukrainian territory, that are under the most and very heavy fire. The first one is Vovchansk. The city, as you can see, another FAB strikes, another barracks, another farm was destroyed as a result of attack. We see another batch of videos somewhere to the south of Vovchansk, and this is the first, it's number 1 of Russian concentrated fire, and the second one area is the Ukrainian bank of Dnipro River. This territory is always under Russian fire. If there were no Dnipro River and no water, let's say natural barrier, I would say that Kherson and Dnipro direction, the second Russian, let's say, direction to attack. But there is a Dnipro River, so that's why I don't think the Russians will risk. So that's why, as I understand, Vovchansk is the next Russian target. And this is the reason why I also was talking that very likely we are entering the final phase of the winter military campaign, which will be ended with the president elections in Russian Federation, with taking under control of Avdiivka, Novomykhailivka, and probably getting to the Zhiribets River and forcing the Ukrainians to step from one bank to another. And the spring military campaign obviously will start with the battle for Vovchansk. I can't tell you for sure when exactly this battle is going to start, but obviously somewhere in April, according to all timings and according to the experience we have. The Russians is already bombing this territory for a very long period of time, so another few months, and then they will be ready to start the ground operation. So Vovchansk is the next target, obviously, when talking about the bombings. When talking about the rest of the front lines, we don't have a lot of updates from Vremivka, almost nothing, just few aviation bombings of the 3 lines to the east of Urozhaine. Robotina, the same story, just few FPV drone strikes of the main supply road, nothing special. And the same story in Krynki. The only update we have is that Ukrainians using drones established the flag somewhere in the center of the field, trying to force the Russians to send some forces to take off the flag. And Ukrainians is using these tactics as some ambush and some let's say ambush for the Russian soldiers. Obviously, nobody is going to move this flag. The only thing the Russians can do is to attack the flag with FPV drones, and I understand they're going to do this. But when talking about this direction, of course, the most important thing is that the Ukrainian head of intelligence was recognized as a terrorist from the Russian side, which gives the Russians lots of tools and lots of options how to, let's say, to disable this person. From the other side, and this is very important because this person, Budanov, is one of the candidates on the role of the next commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine. Zaluzhny, according to information we have, obviously is going to leave his position, and he's trying to hurry up. He tried to force Zelensky to dismiss him as fast as possible because he doesn't want basically to be responsible for the loss of Avdiivka. And for example, today we got a lot of updates from Kiev, and the most important update that the Ukrainian parliament voted for mobilization. This law probably will have its power somewhere in March. In the end of February, there is going to be the second reading and the second voting, and after that, in March, this law will get its legal power, and the total and bloody mobilization is going to start in March, right exactly by the end of the Battle of Avdiivka, when the Ukrainians will be able to count the losses and to understand how many soldiers they need. And the most funny thing about this law is that Zelensky wanted Zaluzhny to represent this law and the draft of this law in the parliament. So the main idea was that Zaluzhny will arrive in the parliament, he will show the law saying, guys, we need to make mobilization, and the reason why we need to mobilization is first, second, third, and fourth reason. So he wants to show Zaluzhny as the only person who's responsible for this bloody law. But according to information we have, Zaluzhny at the final moment took a decision not to go to the parliament, and basically the Ukrainian deputy voted for the law without even Zaluzhny. So this was something like a small trick from Zaluzhny. He still tries to manipulate, to play the game, and obviously he has some political ambitions. Furthermore, the most probably interesting and important update that we have already discussed all over the world is that Tucker Carlson obviously interviewed Putin. Everybody is started counting the numbers of views of his post. As I understand, before I start making the video, he had more than 100 million views of his post about the interview of Putin. Obviously, this is going to be probably the craziest event of 2024, as some Western media called Russia are going to use the weapon of massive destruction. Tucker Carlson is the weapon of massive destruction of Western democracy, probably. And the interesting report we also got from Elon Musk, who promised Tucker Carlson not to ban this interview in the social network X. And obviously this is going to be something interesting. At least I don't know about you, but I will follow and I will watch this interview. From the other side, we see that Biden is very upset with the situation, and because there is a real conflict in the Senate between the Republicans and Democrats, and as we understand, Donald Trump asked, or maybe required or demanded from his partners in the Republican Party not to vote for any help, not to vote for Israeli support, for Ukrainian support, for the border protection. As I understand, Trump wants just to paralyze the work of Biden. So this is terrible situation. As I see, Biden doesn't know what to do, and obviously Biden is really afraid of Tucker Carlson interview with Putin, because as I understand, lots of very interesting things will be discussed during this interview. And another important and very interesting fact, that this interview will be published without any cut scenes. So as it was written, it will be published. This is Putin's styles. He doesn't have anything to hide. Obviously he was asked very difficult and very interesting questions. And later we got update that Tucker Carlson also suggested Zelensky to have interview with him, and that also the same like say doctrine, the same manner, no cuts, everything as it was made. We still haven't received any reply from Zelensky, but we know, according to information we have, Tucker Carlson was added to the peacekeeper list, a peacemaker list, or mirotvorets when talking about Russian language, and this is the list where anybody can get into if according to you or because of reason of you the war in Ukraine exists. So if you're a sponsor, or if you for Russian or pro-Russian and you're like very popular and famous, you will get inside of this list. And if you are inside of this list, I don't think that it's a very good idea to visit Ukraine. So obviously Zelensky probably will not have interview with Tucker Carlson. And that's it for today. Military Summer channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.